Welcome to the Serious TV Drama Podcast with Scot and Dan. I'm Scott, and with me as always, the maze that leads to my madness and the delusion that leads to my psychosis. It's Dan.
Hey, good evening, Scott. It's been a little while. Good to be back.
Yeah, it's certainly been at least a few weeks since we've gotten into the podcasting saddle. And more importantly for our listeners this evening, I think it's been almost a year since the first season of Legion melted our minds and also made for one of our favorite podcasts to do. I think it was like a year ago, just about, something like that. So we are back, obviously, to talk about the season premiere of Legion. And we've been looking forward to this for weeks or months now, ever since, when I saw the first trailer, I was like, oh my God, it's coming back. And it's coming back sooner than I thought. So I've been looking forward to this for some time. I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've been distracted with other good things happening lately. So I knew it was happening, but it wasn't just like, it came up on me pretty fast. I was definitely looking forward to talking about it again, but I don't even know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying. You're saying, I'm a very busy man, but oh yes, that's coming too. I'm happy to hear that. Now let me go back to traveling and murdering and whatever it is. Traveling. Sorry. Anyway, so.
Well, speaking of murder, I watched. Me and my kids watched Shadow of a Doubt last week, so I thought you'd like that.
Oh, Hitchcock's own personal favorite, and usually in the running for one of my personal favorite of his. It's usually that fighting out with strangers on a train and a few others.
Yeah, after we watched Night of the Hunter, then we watched that, and it's like, there's a fair amount of these movies that are okay for kids to watch. I mean, not like they haven't grown up in a miserable world with stupid shootings and other crap going on, so they can definitely handle, tame 50s stuff. But yeah, it's fun watching these things with them.
And basically you had what would have been like the perfect Scott Candiati double feature night. Night of the Hunter and Shadow of Doubt. Like, no, oh my God! Just end with Chinatown and be done with it or something. Because I'm a huge fan of both of those movies, as anyone knows. I used to do them. Yeah. I used to do a Robert Mitchum impression of the LOVE, but I'm not going to do that here.
I have the thing I do with the kids whenever we watch something, Twilight Zone or Star Trek or whatever. Then whenever I tuck them in that night, I always basically, act like I'm murdering them in some fashion or killing them, so if I'm like the salt monster from Star Trek, I get, weird fingers out and pretend I'm like whatever. So then that night when I was tucking them in, I had a knife in my hand that I kept like, jamming through the side of my pocket a bit. And then I was, doing some Robert Mitchum singing, so they like that, they got a big grin on their faces as I loom menacingly over them at night.
Yeah. All right, just you really want to cement this reputation you've come to embrace in the last several months or years or whatever. It's perfect.
Yeah, I'll never escape the me being a good road tripper equals me being a excellent serial killer thing. So I may as well get as much as out of it as I can.
Well, it explains maybe why the Mindhunter podcast is one of our best ones. Anyway. Okay, but we are here to talk about Legion. But first, since, as I said, it has been nearly a year since we last left our David and Sid and the rest of the Legionnaires, so I thought maybe we should just take a minute to remember just where we left off back in season 1.
Please do.
Now, I'll make this faster than the amount of time David thought he was away, apparently. So just to remind everybody, in the final episode back in Season 1, which would have been Chapter 8, we witnessed the supposedly successful efforts to remove the Shadow King from David, kind of like trying to excise a cancer from his mind and from his memories and so on. However, after a brief side trip in the fierce warrior Carrie Loudermilk, the Shadow King does end up finding a new vessel, Oliver Bird, whom we later see departing Summerlin via sports car with Lenny in the passenger seat. And although David and Clark, who we used to be known as the Interrogator, agree that the mutants and the other peeps from Summerlin should be working with Division 3 to track down and put a stop to the incredible evil that is the Shadow King, the season actually ends with David being abducted. And I guess temporarily shrunk, although how much actual physicality means anything in Legion is entirely debatable, by a floating robotic orb that just zooms away, leaving a seemingly bewildered Sid on the terrace wondering, WTF, which is saying something, since just about every chapter of Legion has a handful of such moments. And I think that's about it. I figure that's a nicely concise way of reminding everyone where we left off, right?
Yeah. Other than you didn't mention that the floating orbs are reminiscent of the ones from the Star Trek Next Generation episode, "The Arsenal of Freedom." So, but other than that, I think you've covered it pretty well.
Okay, so is there some sort of drinking game I haven't become aware of over the last year that every time you make a Next Generation reference, we have to have a drink? Yeah. Anyway, so with that said, time to move on to the season premiere, which would be Chapter 9 of Legion. Hey, so going over my old notes for how we did the first season, it looks like we tended to go, act by act of the episode. But it wasn't so much a pure recap as really discussing and analyzing the events in some chronological fashion, which is always a funny thing when you're dealing with a show like Legion. Because time is, at best, fluid on this show. Which, to further the irony that much, even more so, the series opens up with Oliver and basking in the sunlight in that pool, and the first thing Lenny says is, "It's Tuesday, right?" Which makes me want to say, yes, Lenny, Legion has now been moved to Tuesday night, so now everyone knows. But anyway, in response, Oliver, and I think I'm always never going to be clear watching the season. When is it Oliver speaking? When is it, or is it always the Shadow King speaking as Oliver? Is Oliver's personality infused somehow with what the Shadow King? I'm very unclear on that. Although I know they're kind of deliberately that way. I mean, quite frankly, I think the Shadow King is actually 3 characters at once right now on the show, and I guess he or it can do that because he's semi-omnipotent or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But just to finish my little time trip here, his response to her is basically saying that he doesn't like to have conversations about time. Even though time obviously does play a lot of odd parts in this series, but it means that he can never be a guest on one of our podcasts. Because if there's one thing we like to talk about on this podcast, whether it be The Flash or Dark or Travelers, we always be talking about time here.
That's true. And when we take a lot of time to talk about them, usually.
So, sometimes we have a really excellent track record with our Legion podcast. So I know I'm jinxing it by saying it. You know what? I'm defying the jinx. I'm defying the jinx. I'm reversing the curse.
2018, no more jinx.
We are going. This is going. Our Legion podcasts are going to be solid and not 3 hours and 42 minutes. So the next thing that happens is I also want to turn into kind of a question for you, or just something to wonder about with this series in general, because we come out of this, we get the shot within a shot within a shot thing that happens. We zoom out from Oliver and Lenny in the pool, and it almost to appear that their existence is within the eye of another character, who I'm guessing, assuming, believing to be the actual physical body of Amal Farouk. This hasn't been absolutely confirmed. I haven't looked up, the character, the actor's name in IMDb to know that, which I guess I could have done that before the podcast, but I'm guessing from the way the show is, that's who that's supposed to be. And we're going to find out later as we talk about it. It's going to play a major part in the rest of the series. And then we zoom out from him, who's clearly in Paris, and then that is in Oliver's eyeball, as he's hanging out in that club, which later looks like it's just called Club, whatever. So I was trying to figure this out, because here's the thing. If this was just like, if we were just watching some, I don't know, music video, or even a number of other series, over the years, we could just nod that this is just some sort of visual flourish. It's like part of a dream or something. And it's merely done for effect and not intended to be taken literally. But Legion is one of only a very, very few shows. In fact, I think Twin Peaks might be the only other one that comes to mind that does this, where the strange and surreal is often literally happening.
Yeah.
So I paused when I was watching the other night. It's like, how do I interpret this? Is it really in existence within an eye to another eye and so on? Is this all? I'm not sure. Or what might make the most sense now that, and it's just come to me as I'm saying it, maybe we're just following the mind of the Shadow King, and that because he is both Oliver and Lenny, and his physicalness is that person in Paris, and then we end up in Oliver where he's primarily housing his essence, or whatever the hell whatever we would call it. So maybe we're just following his own, I don't know, brainwaves. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to interpret it.
Well, it's hard. It's hard to know exactly what they're doing, because the pool that the two of them are hanging out in. I mean, it's definitely made to look like an eye. So as to whether or not that just they're doing that to be cute, or if it's just like actually like chilling out inside their eye. Because I think that kind of works out. Because I mean, in the first season, it kind of seemed like when the Yellow King, or the whatever, I just went fucking True Detective.
For shame. For shame.
Yeah, when the Shadow King is hanging out.
One listener is happy, the rest are not.
Yeah. Kind of like that character tends to. I just when you think about it, he's just kind of hanging out in the back of David's. Just kind of like just out of the periphery sometimes. So maybe that kind of fits with that.
Yeah, and also it's when I mentioned before about him being these three different things. I mean, that's also, if we go back to season 1, the Shadow King seemed to be a number of things. He could be, Lenny obviously was the most overt manifestation of him, but he was also like the angriest boy in the world thing, or that dog, or even David at a certain point. So, and sometimes it could be at the same time. So, you can't really apply conventional. I can't believe him. Conventional body possessing villains the way one normally would. But what's interesting about this, more so, and is as we see this happen, it's at this point we get an off-screen narrator talking about a maze, and it's all about visualizing and imagining a maze. When he says it, whether it's in a desert with rock, whatever, then we strip that away, and it's all about the maze that you've made in your mind, and how he's really talking about madness, and that's where the maze leads to, and that's how one, that's how one goes insane, whatever, blah, 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 blah. I also would say that in that little monologue, I actually thought they pulled off something talking about a maze and madness in just a minute that they spent an entire season of Westworld trying to accomplish. But about that unseen narrator, who I'm pretty sure at this point, most of our listeners who are listening either A, figured it out themselves, or B, read about it online if they didn't catch it themselves, but whatever. It was... What better person to talk about the nature of madness than the preeminent madman himself, John Hamm. It's John Hamm as a narrator.
Yeah.
No.
Pretty awesome. As listeners of our podcast know, we've always enjoyed podcasting him, star of Black Mirror Christmas episode, which we covered. So we recommend anybody who wants to see some John Hamm action to go watch Black Mirror's Christmas episode, Christmas.
I think is it White Christmas or Black Christmas? No, it's White Christmas. It's not Black Christmas.
White Christmas.
Why didn't they call it Black Christmas? That would have made a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Idiots. Anyway, yes, because and also if you're a big John Hamm fan, there's also he was very good on Unbelievably, the Kimmy Schmidt show on Netflix. So that's another thing you can check out with John Hamm. What else has he done? Oh, he's also very good in several seasons whenever he showed up on 30 Rock. So if you're really interested in the work of John Hamm, there are several sitcoms he's done, Saturday Night Live appearances, of course. You know,
Yeah, he's in some movie called Baby Driver, and he looks like a real badass. So I haven't
yeah,
seen it, but it's John Hamm.
I
It's
am
worth
di-
watching.
I am dying to see that, and because this John Hamm guy, which I've seen on these aforementioned shows, he's definitely a talented guy. He's really good in those Mercedes Benz. Oh, he's great in those tax commercials. There's another thing. So if you want to be a John Hamm fan, you can check him out on those tax commercials because there's nothing else that one would choose to watch him in.
True.
Now I didn't. I will confess that his first little narration here, I wasn't sure it was him. My ears did go, wait, that voice sounds vaguely familiar, but there was it seemed a bit lower or more gravelly here, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, same here. I'm like, is that John Hamm? I'm just like, no, this is like, who is this guy? I mean, but my first thought was John Hamm, but
Right,
I was just like, no, he's speaking a little bit different cadence this time. So,
right.
but
But but when
yeah,
when the narrator shows up again late midway through the episode, talking about delusions, I was like, oh, that is John Hamm. That was because his voice was more. It was just more clear. Um, and I was just like, oh, I was like, I don't. I was like going online through. I couldn't find anything online at that moment. But like an hour later, I was like, oh, there they are. There's articles mentioning it's John Hamm. Okay. And I read the whole article about Noah Hawley calling him, and their agent got annoyed because they didn't go through his agent or something. It's like, oh, I know, I just called him directly. Blah blah blah. Anyway, so that means it's entirely possible, based on the little bit I read in the Hollywood Reporter, it's entirely possible we may be getting these little, I don't know, let's call them like these philosophical PSAs during the course of the whole season, delivered by the Ham Man here. That pleases me to no end. So
yeah, and I'm gonna call the shot here. John Hamm's gonna be in the fourth season of Fargo. Whenever they get around to doing it, I think it's gonna happen. So
I actually I can't say I literally, because that would be the incorrect use of the word, but it kind of felt like my heart just leapt up just at least 3 or 4 inches, like towards my throat when you said that, and then went back down. I was like, slow down. That might not be what's going to happen. Remember how excited I got a few weeks ago when I thought Hugh Laurie was going to get cast for season 3 of The Crown,
yeah,
and then it turned out to be the guy who like no one really cared about from Game of Thrones or something. I was like, okay. Well, I mean, I'm fine with that casting, but that would
yeah,
be that. But the no, oh that, oh,
that would be.
oh my god,
You notice a lot of actors, that's like to work with, certain people, and there definitely seems to be, Noah Hawley likes to use the same people in a variety of stuff,
true, true.
just like the Coen brothers and all these other Fargo, other related stuff. So I'd like to think that this is a harbinger of that excellent thing, which would actually make us look forward to a fourth season of Fargo after a kind of a misfire last year.
They should bounce back to roughly the era of the first season, and just somehow so we could get John Hamm and Bob Odenkirk on the show at the same time together. So we would have hmm, we would have these two actors who I would really like to see together, although I don't know why, but I just really like to see them together. And I'd be wearing a certain shirt. Anyway, let's get back to Legion. So, what? Oh, so where was I? Oh, so we were the reactions to what's happened to David since David was whisked away. So clearly the mutants from season one. I know it sounds almost like I'm being disrespectful referring to them that way, but aren't they all kind of mutants pretty much? I think they all.
Yes.
What is it? What is it that Melanie can do? Was she kind of telepathic or something?
Yeah, I can't remember what anybody can do anymore.
Yeah, well, I remember, and I can never pronounce his name correctly because as we no, I am horrible when it comes to pronouncing names. Period. Taname, because his name is spelled
Yeah.
Ptonomy, whatever. Sorry. I know that he can reach into your memories and actually experience, and he can actually like walk through your memories and that whole thing. I remember his ability, and I remember Sid's ability was the when she would come into contact with someone that she could essentially switch bodies, um, which she apparently sort of does with a cat in this episode for a few minutes, which I
That's
want to
awesome.
I want to rewatch the episode just to watch that again because I said, wait, are they implying that that her brain is that she's okay? I need to watch that again. I mean, I'm going to rewatch every episode just so we can always do
Oh,
any further thoughts on the previous episode for every podcast. Anyway, but
oh yeah, yeah. With Sid washing herself like a cat, I'm pretty
uh,
sure that's what.
oh, if I had a gif of that, it would be anyway.
Huh.
No. Keep it PG. Anyway, so the mutants from season one have indeed merged with Division Three, and we even get a little breakdown at Division because Division Three they're the ones who handle like the day to day boots on the ground operations, and they have all the different subdivisions, like investigations, research, strategy, tactical. Apparently, that's like the division that gets their hands dirty. Um, but so the one thing about Division Three that merits some at least a reaction, if not a conversation here. It's the people or creatures or whatever you want to call them that appear to be in charge now. We are we meet this silent Admiral Fukuyama, who's apparently a man who keeps a, for lack of a prettier way to phrase it, a woven basket over his head of some sort. And then there's these three women who each have these bobbed haircuts and, well, mustaches. And I think I later learned they're actually named Vermilion numbers 1, 2, and 3, which
Huh.
doesn't help. And they all speak in this oddly sing song voice, which is kind of reminiscent if you ever used Microsoft Word, the speech application, if you wanted it to read a document you wrote. And it would always, the voice, whatever voice you chose, like whatever female voice you chose, it would always be quite less than human because the cadences and the emphases were always not quite where a normal person would ever put them. And that's kind of what these three women sound like. Um, Now, here's the thing. I'll admit, there was a little part of me that was going, okay, hey, Noah, maybe we're going a little too far off the reservation here, because I mean, obviously, this is a series where one might concede it is maybe more style than substance at times. I get that because it's such a gorgeous looking and bizarre show, whatever. Um, I'm kind of wondering about going this far with these characters. Now, if they find a way to work them into the show, the entirety of the show, where the way they are is significant and important and necessary to the story, it maybe won't. I'm not going to say it bothered me. I was just kind of just staring at it, going, "Are we going? Do we need to go that far or not?" I mean, it's Legion, so maybe I shouldn't care. What did you make of it? I mean, did you just say this is just crazy fun crap, or what?
Well, I thought it was kind of cool. It kind of felt a little comic booky, just like the one, when you look at them, like just like the way they act, and when you look at them, when they had those weird magnifiers in front of them,
Oh yeah,
they kind of look like one of Captain America's enemies, like that. So I'm just like, yeah, it's weird, it's different,
that's
it's
true.
kind of sounds like auto tune, but as long as it's not garbage music, I can handle it. So,
Yeah, Yeah, I get there's a certain auto tune quality. I can see that too.
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be something I'd want to see for like 20 minutes an episode, but a few minutes here and there to get a debriefed or something like that. I don't think it's not something that's going to bother me.
Yeah. Okay. I am not claiming in any way it bothered me. I know I tend to fawn over this show. I mean, it was Legion was my pick for my favorite show of last year. So I'm trying to pick my spots to be at least somewhat critical. Even if
Yeah.
it's not a fully felt criticism. It was one of those because obviously this is a show that does always run the risk of being a little bit too it can be too self indulgent at times, or it can. Oh, I'm sorry. It can be perceived as being too self indulgent. I don't think it is, but I can see someone thinking that. Um, and I could see people also lobbing certain criticisms at it the same way they did with, well, to say it again, to Twin Peaks. And this may just be one of those shows like you're either going to get it or you don't. Although there's a lot of it you're not really meant to get, at least not in the moment. I mean, I don't care how smart you are. There's no one who sits and watches, like this episode of Legion and totally is like gets every last moment and it isn't left wondering about anything, because that's not the nature of this show. It's
No.
right,
Yeah. Yeah, this episode really felt like, like an old Tarkovsky movie. I'm not sure if you've seen Stalker, but I think you've seen Solaris, right? The first one?
Yes.
Yeah,
First.
so, kind of had that kind of feel. We're just like, I mean, there's probably meaning behind some of this. A lot of it's just style, but not everybody's going to get it, and not everybody's going to think the pacing's cool. And, some of those people are just dummies who live in California that won't understand it, and I'm glad that they don't understand it because, we're smarter than them. But
Right. Yeah, I agree, but that's as much as airtime as that we're going to give that person. The one thing I'll even say to further defend Legion, again, not that anyone's ripping on it. I'm just it's like the fantasy argument here, and why I picked it as my favorite show from last year is, unlike, say, what David Lynch has done or would do with Twin Peaks, whether it be last year or the original run. And again, love Twin Peaks. This is not meant as a criticism of Twin Peaks, but we know full well there are any number of things that Lynch does just because he wants to. It doesn't.
yeah,
There isn't any additional meaning meant for certain things. Some things are just wacky because he's an artist and that's what he does, and that's why I have no problem with it. And yes, some people say, "Oh, it's a red herring." I was like, "No, you just decided to think of it that way." But he did that back in 26 years ago, and he certainly did it this time around.
Oh yeah, Noah Hawley's definitely different. But when he does something that's abstract, like you just get the impression that there's some kind of meaning behind it instead of just
Yes,
like this is just what came out of my head and this is what I'm going to do. That's how Lynch rolls. But with Hawley, I mean, you definitely can just see like there's like a board somewhere where like there's kind of ideas
yeah,
written down and this isn't just like random free association like writing.
absolutely. I think there's nothing that's on the screen on Legion that's there by accident or there just as a whim. Or just like, oh, that's just a fun little Easter egg kind of. He doesn't do that. Even with Fargo, even in a season that we didn't care for as much, or at least certain parts of it we certainly didn't care for as much, like season 3 of Fargo, there was still a definite concerted effort to tell a bigger story than what we were seeing on screen. There were definitely themes and messages that were coming through. The problem with Fargo that time around, it's like we just weren't as interested in the main characters as we were in previous seasons. And he's also
So
doing.
could you imagine if John Hamm had played the twins last season? Oh.
Well, yeah, but the problem wasn't the problem wasn't the actor. I mean, Ewan McGregor was fine in it. It was just the characters themselves. We weren't that interested in them. They weren't that compelling. And the one that was mildly compelling, they killed off. If they had switched it, if that had been the one who had remained alive and they killed the other, anyway. I thought it kind of. I definitely think it redeemed itself in the second half of the season, and I'll tell you something. I bought a lot of wacky T-shirts recently, a couple different orders of them, or not wacky, just really cool TV, mostly TV related. I came so close. Number one, I came close to one that was Legion themed, and I still may end up getting it at some point in the next month if I decide to spend another 20-something bucks of the image of it's like an image of the astral cube place where Oliver was living all those years. but there was also a shirt that was based on the little cartoon character from that one episode from Fargo season 3. You know, the sad little robot who kept saying, I'm here to help, or I'll let me help you. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yep.
Oh, that's all you're gonna say? Yep. After I do all that, fuck you. All right, so. And there's just one I was about to say that David goes up a notch in your eyes because he clearly loves waffles. But now I'm not even going to say it.
Oh, well, yeah.
I knew
I
you
got
were.
plenty to say about the waffles, so we'll get there.
So, about those waffles. Because I think we see something else later on in the episode. So, their cafeterias are set up where there's like this little never-ending stream in the middle of the table, and the food kind of just floats by on these little boats or something.
Yeah,
What?
isn't that amazing?
What the hell?
I get the impression that like probably somewhere in the world like somebody does that, but like I don't know where, but wherever it is, I want to go there, especially if they have waffles with delicious fruit toppings on them, because that's how I roll.
I was excited when he said waffles. I'll agree. I was like, yes, he's a waffle guy. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, finally, yeah. As any intelligent person or as any extremely unstable person should be.
Well, it's just it also for a show like Legion with its everything from the metaphysical to science. There's so much about a waffle with you've got these little cells within them and these cubes, and you've got certain equations you can create around them and blah blah blah. Anyway, I'm just being silly now.
I kind of hope they keep this waffle theme going this season, and then maybe like at the end of the season they'll imprison the Shadow King in like maybe a pat of butter instead of an ice cube, just kind of like sitting on a waffle forever. That'd be kind of cool.
Oh. And then maybe they could be like a waffle spinoff. Anyway, it's at that point that we realize that he doesn't that we realize that David doesn't. I keep wanting to call him Dan now. It's really strange. It must be the waffle. It's the waffle thing. It's the waffle thing. He doesn't know that almost an entire year has passed since that orb snatched him. But he does get to finally reunite with Sid, and that very long Act 1 does end with our couple having what I would say what transcends the physical plane kind of sex. For the rest of the acts, I'm going to try just to stick to just like the major one or two things as like our points of conversation. So your second act, Act 2. First thing that's really important. We are introduced to the idea of something called the catalyst. Apparently it's some sort of psychological virus that leaves adults essentially frozen in time. And the use of the word frozen is appropriate because the one thing that is moving is their teeth, which eerily continue to chatter. That was it was one of those things I didn't realize what was happening at first. And then when I realized, oh, that's a new creepy thing I can't believe no one's actually thought of before. Or if someone has, I haven't seen the movie or TV show which has done it in the past. So that was a strange one. They also established that children apparently are not susceptible to the catalyst. So I don't know if it's some or all of the armed guard that we see at the Division 3 are actually children. When I do the rewatch, I'm going to keep an eye out for that to make sure that's the case. But I think the case is that all the armed guards are actually kids as opposed to full-grown adults. So that's different. Now, are they saying that this is something that... Now, is this something that, I guess, Oliver or the Shadow King, whatever form he's taking, is deliberately spreading, or is it an unintentional side effect of it? I wasn't really clear on that.
Yeah, I got the impression that he wasn't doing it on purpose. It was just kind of like happening. But as they haven't gave us enough, I wouldn't say they've given us enough details yet to know for sure or why.
Yeah, it's one of those things that kind of like they throw it in there and it's like, okay, well, we're gonna have to see how this manifests over the course of the season, but it's something different. Um, the other major thing that happens in Act Two is that we do finally see what's become of Dr. Melanie Bird, and she's a mess. So my question about her is this: because she's going on about to Sid about men and how they leave and whatever. Basically, she's clearly been all screwed up about what happened to Oliver. Um, since we know a year has passed, I'm getting so the implication is so she's been like this for the past year. Is that
Yeah.
accurate? Um, and it looks like she's kind of gotten herself hooked on the drug that David used to take back in the day. That vapor drug thing that they used to show he and Lenny taking early back in season one, and now she seems like she's getting high on it. That's what it looks like to me, at least.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I assume that at least, that developed like over the course of the year, because I mean, they definitely showed her and Sid like negotiating with the humans, just like hey, mutants don't suck. We'll be on your team, whatever. Figure this shit out.
Mm-hmm.
So for a while she had her act together, but but she definitely seems to have fallen into that nice, just try to get doped up phase.
Yeah, it's one of those things which I liked. I thought it was a fascinating thing to see in this episode, but obviously, I'm hoping that from this point on, maybe just due to David's arrival or whatever, or maybe a turn of events with the whereabouts of Oliver or something. I kind of want Gene. I don't want to. I don't want to sit through an entire season of Gene Smart like that. So I'm hoping
Now,
because it's just too much of a waste of her character. However, I can't move away from that scene and that act without acknowledging how much I loved her line about the saddest words in the English language being vacant lot. And what I loved about it was simple. Because, yeah, it kind of sounds kind of profound or whatever, but it's the opposite. Because she offers no clever explanation for her observation at all, pretty much. And and to me, there are some people who might watch that and go, "Oh, that writer wasn't very good. He didn't really come up with it." It's like, no, 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 that's great writing. Because that's I'm going to remember that more. It's much more interesting that way. And there's a lot of different DC writers do things like that all the time, where they just take a slight swerve where you think you're going to get something expositional or whatever, and they go a little meta on you, and they don't really. It's like there's not really an explanation for it. I just love when you can come up with a good organic way to get away with that. And someone who's been a hot mess and high for like the last several months, she shouldn't have any really great explanation for what she just said. So I
nope.
really enjoyed that. So we mentioned earlier about John Hamm in the narration, and Act 3 actually opens up with. I like that it's Act 3, and it opens up with a thing telling us it's Chapter 3, Delusions, and we essentially get John Hamm telling us 3 different stories to illustrate and define delusions. And all the accompanying visuals that go along with them. Kind of interesting that the episode would take the time to take such a extended side trip, but again, this is a very Noah Hawley thing, because it's certainly something he does here, and it's similar to things he's already done on Legion last season. It's even kind of reminiscent to some of the stuff he's kind of gotten away with on Fargo as well, although not as overtly as this. But he's a writer and a creator who really loves these kind of odd little asides, to take the time to like explain something very esoteric to the audience or something. It's interesting that he does that all the time. All I'm going to say, basically we get these 3 stories. One is kind of like a fable about this little Zhangzi and a butterfly. Zhangzi, he had dreamed for so long that he had become a butterfly, so when he woke up, he wasn't sure if he had become a butterfly or if the butterfly had become him or something like that. So you get this very pretty little fable, and then we get a straight up horror story of a man who one day after he trips or something, he becomes more and more convinced that his leg is not his leg, and then cuts it off. So that was pretty horrific. And then finally we get these visuals to accompany what first seems like a simple metaphor, where they're comparing the genesis of an idea and how it leads to delusion, much the way we look at an egg and the discovery of its contents and whatever. But these visuals get increasingly more dark as one egg cracks apart to reveal something kind of slimy and black and totally the perfect pet for a briefly appearing Lenny. And as we get to the end of this discussion on delusions, much the way John Hamm told us about how the maze leads to madness, he ends here with how these delusions lead to psychosis, which then now I've explained our introduction to the podcast tonight. So I really enjoyed this little side trip here. And yes, I confess at least 15% of that is because we got to hear John Hamm talk. But also, I just enjoyed it because it was just such an odd, strange way to spend several minutes telling us about the nature of delusions. But I really liked it. Did you enjoy this part, or were you kind of wishing they'd get back to the story, or what?
No, it was super cool. I always like when they go off on tangents like this, and and then they worked it in later in the episode. You saw one of those little black things slithering around, and
yes,
I guess in David's dream, like banging dream reality or whatever. So
thank you, because I was debating whether I was going to mention it later in my recapping, and I wasn't. So I'm glad you mentioned it. So now my conscience is clear on that. Because I just didn't know a nice way to say that. Speaking of scenes, it's funny how on a show like Legion, we have spent last year we have spent so much time and fun talking about some of the craziest scenes and sequences that we've ever seen. Period. That we saw like in season 1, and we're getting to a crazy one that's coming up soon in this episode. But like from last year, like the Bolero scene and all that other stuff and whatever. However, I will just as much enjoy when they do something that's the rare low-key scene on this show. When it's just a simple conversation. And one of my favorite scenes in this entire episode comes after this talk of delusions, where we get this little scene between David and Clark. Again, the formerly the interrogator. Now, I just enjoyed it because certainly they have a much more pleasant rapport now than they did in most of their other previous face-to-face conversations in season 1. Since they did manifest from either interrogations originally or being kind of pissed off about having half your face kind of burned off while you're talking to someone, whatever. But I really love this conversation and talking and giving us just even more insight into Clark and growing up with a mom who watched soap operas and stuff. I really enjoyed that scene a lot. Did you like that part? Did it grab your fancy?
Oh yeah, that was awesome. And when he goes to take the bite of the ice cream there, it was just like, such a nice thing, where like if you weren't paying attention, it wouldn't make any sense to you. But just like the meaning behind that was just awesome.
Yes.
Really clever, right?
It's just, I mean, it's on one hand, it might not be the most subtle of scenes, but one of the things I love about Legion is that they will alternate between something being very subtle and something being very, hit you in the face with it kind of stuff, whether it be a visual or a choice of music or whatever it is. But by and large, it seems it's the rare show that seems to work no matter whether it's a light touch or a heavy touch. And
yeah, of course. Of course, you can also view it as deliberately too, because he was basically, he wasn't trying to hide the fact that he thought that David was lying about this, so
right.
It was just kind of like, so while it wasn't subtle for a reason, because that's what the character was trying to portray.
Oh, exactly. And of course, he's also talking about soap operas, and he's using soap operas as his way of kind of pointing out how how implausible and ridiculous the frequently used plot devices on soap operas like Evil Twins and Amnesia tend to be, and he's kind of likening that to, David insisting that he doesn't remember anything save for a few little flashes of like trees or a city rooftop or a dance club or whatever. And of course, the one thing that soap opera is kind of known for is they're not very subtle. And we go right from that very normal, simple conversation to David actually meeting with Admiral Fukuyama and those 3 mustachioed women. And that's where we find out there's going to be essentially a race to find the physical body of Amal Farouk. Now, as I said before, I'm kind of assuming, and again, I don't know this for a fact, again, haven't looked it up online or anything, but I'm assuming that bearded person that we saw in the beginning in Paris, that's the actual physical body of Amal Farouk. I guess. I don't really understand. Wow, something about Legion I don't understand. What a shocker. I'm not clear on what's going on here. Because
because I
go on. No, you should.
Oh,
you should talk.
Yeah, because because I sort of have the impression that he's dead and they're actually looking for his body, body. Is that what you're thinking, or do you think there's actual a Farouk body walking around there?
It would seem to make more sense if the body was not alive.
Yeah,
but I'm getting the impression that it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if is it a body in a tomb somewhere, but then they kind of established that Farouk comes from so many hundreds of years ago, unless it's something that's been mummified or something. I don't know. I just got this feeling it's that guy we see in Paris, which then is strange because that's someone who's alive and walking around. Is he not Farouk? Is Farouk not in? You know what I mean? I don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't.
Right.
That's something that's going to require explanation. But of course, it's not meant to be understood right now. We'll see it and figure it out as it goes along. So I'm just like, I don't know. I don't understand. Stop making me feel stupid. Anyway, Act 4 is really short, which is really cool. David goes into what I guess is kind of like their version of a sensory deprivation tank. It seems like every other sci-fi show has to have something like that at some point. I guess
Yeah.
They did it on Fringe, of course. I'm pretty damn sure they did it on at least one X-Files episode. They must have. They had it on that. It's been done time and time again. The point of him going into this, what I'm going to still refer to that way, is I guess to boost or amplify his signal. It somehow they feel he still has this connection to the Shadow King. So that's why he's in there doing that. And while that's happening, Sid and Tanami discuss whether or not they even believe David. Clearly she does, but I think she has her lingering doubts. And clearly he doesn't. That's pretty much it for Act 4. It's not really, like I said, it's a pretty boom boom. And Act 5 is the dance-off. I really enjoyed the dance-off quite a bit. I especially enjoyed, I'm going to forget his name. I should have. Well, I'll use the character's name then. Oliver's partaking in the dance thing was my favorite part of the dance-off. As good as David was, and as good, of course, as amazing as Aubrey Plaza is as Lenny once again. But it's Oliver who makes that hysterical to watch. He's just so much fun to watch in that sequence. And this is not the first time we've gotten some dancing on the show. If I'm remembering season 1 correctly, I think we had at least one major dance sequence, if not more, on season 1. Wasn't there? There was at least one, I think.
Oh yeah, even I think there was even one in the pilot, and after that too.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was the pilot or the second episode, but I think it was the pilot also, if I'm recalling it. That was when they were still at the asylum. or something. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
But no, it was cool, really really nice. I mean, and the way that they shot it was really sweet too. I mean, as it got a little bit brighter as the time went on, well, Carrie Loudermilk was plugging in audio lines or whatever he was doing there. It was pretty cool,
Oh yeah, that was amazing.
and him dancing too.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, giving Bill. I mean, Bill Irwin is such an accomplished physical. I mean, he was for lack of a nicer way to put it, he was basically a professional clown for years. On Broadway and in the theater, whatever. He's very limber, can do amazing things with it with his physicality. So the fact they gave him the opportunity to do that was, yeah. I mean, one of the things I'm looking forward to just to rewatch this episode is just really taking my time and just enjoying that whole sequence all over again. And what you were saying about the look of it, there's something. Again, there's so many fascinating things about the visuals of the show. Either you could spend an hour talking just about the use of color or the use of light or lighting, whatever. In this episode specifically, during this sequence, earlier scenes, and when we get to the end as well, I think it's the most, at least from my recollection, some of the most interesting and experimental and really different use of lighting that I've seen on any show, and including Legion itself. I mean, they use lighting in a lot of different ways and very deliberately to even not just create mood, but almost just give someone just a totally different sort of appearance as far as who or what they are or when they are, so to speak. So and I know you really latch into the visuals of these shows and how they're shot.
yeah.
So I keep thinking, oh, Dan would love the show even if the story sucked because it's just such an amazing thing to watch. It's just so beautiful to watch.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I definitely enjoy all that weird lighting and stuff they do, and thinking about why they do it. And this is one show where, I mean, I imagine it's a lot of work setting up all this stuff, but I hope that the people that are crafting it really enjoy the result, because I certainly do.
Yeah, and when you watch a show like this, you start saying, "Oh, why don't you win all the technical awards?" But there's always someone else out there. Which takes us to the final act, and basically, just to wrap up that final act, Sid, who I had already believed was skeptical, was trying to suppress her skepticism when it comes to David, but she does still say to him that you're keeping secrets, and David tries to dissuade her from that, and he even gives her a gift of this compass that's been specially designed to always point to him. So he's like her. He'll always be like her North Star, so to speak. So she'll always be able to find them or something. It's interesting, but since on a side thing here, as far as David and the lying, because it seems like most, if not everyone, is skeptical. And the only reason she is trying to believe him is because, well, she loves him. He's her man, whatever. So I'm wondering, is David aware that he's lying, or is he doing it deliberately? Because he is. We already know he is keeping things. When he says he's keeping secrets, we know that because we've seen him see things that he hasn't told her. So we know for a fact he's keeping secrets. But I wonder if overall if he knows that he's lying, or if he's or if he's not aware of it or not.
Yeah, I get the impression that he's definitely withholding it on purpose this time, and he's aware of it, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, see, I agree. I think he is aware of it. I the whole point of what happened last season was to release him under the whatever control the Shadow King had on him. So now he should be in control of his own mind, so to speak, and make the choices that he wants to, whatever. So I think he's choosing to hide certain things or just out and out lie, whatever. So we do get this one more stab at David's memory of when the orb had whisked him away. And what I was just saying about lighting, we get this scene of like almost total blackness, and he meets a silent and how to describe what Sid looks like here. I mean, the lighting keeps changing on her. It keeps the way they light her face keeps changing, and at times it makes her look a little bit sweatier or a little bit somewhat as beautiful a woman as the actress is. It does give her it ages her
Well,
a little bit, gives her a bit
yeah,
more.
she's got.
Yeah, you see like the circles under the lines under her eyes, whatever. She looks a little bit haggard. But it's interesting. It's all, but it looks like that's almost all done with lighting more so than with any sort of makeup effects, other than oh, let's wet you up to give you a slightly sweaty look or whatever. Um, and by the way, I didn't notice this the first time I watched it, so shame on me. But when I was skimming over some stuff online, I noticed something was mentioned about this scene, which made me look up every recap. And I didn't want to read everyone's recap because I got my own thing to write. But I just zeroed in on the very end of the final act to see how they mentioned, how they described this. And again, there's probably a bunch that do. But I read about 1, 2, 3, 4. I read about 4 or 5 of them. Only one of them mentioned this, and the other 4 didn't. She's missing an arm. And maybe the people who didn't mention it thought that based on the lighting that perhaps her left arm had like a long black glove and that's why you couldn't see it, and why she'd be wearing a glove on one arm or not the other, who knows, but it's that's possible. But I got up really close to the TV screen and I watched it really closely just before we started recording tonight. No, she's got, as far as my eyes are telling me, she's got one arm. It looks like it comes to a rounded nub at the end where the elbow is. There's no glove there. She
And
only
she's
has
not bending it behind her for some reason
no,
either.
because
No.
we see it also when she turns around and leaves, and it ends at her elbow. I kind of wonder why David doesn't mention it when he's looking at her. He's like, Sid, you're here, and he's more surprised by the fact she's not talking and decides to play Pictionary with him than the fact she's missing an arm. But anyway,
Wonder if that relates to the dude that cut his leg off in the parable or whatever earlier in the episode.
I do not think that's a coincidence. I'm I'm hoping for Sydney's sake. It's a
Huh.
uh, what's the thing from Christmas Carol? It's not the future. It's something where what might happen in the future. I can't think. It's late. I'm sorry. I'm tired. But you know what I'm talking. You know what I'm trying to say. I'm just not.
Yeah.
I've lost my ability to be articulate all of a sudden. Anyway, the point of this little moment is she basically threw her little light stick and their game of charades, Pictionary, whatever you want to call it. David then realizes that while he's in the present, she's talking to him from the future. The future Sid, which basically has only one arm, so maybe she's a drummer for Def Leppard. I don't know. And it's about Farouk's body and looking for Farouk's body, and she's basically telling David that he has to help him, which is kind of bewildering to David. That wait, I've got to help the bad guy find his body, the one thing that we're not supposed to be doing. So that was an interesting turn of events. Plus the fact he has the assumption. I don't know if it's confirmed, although by her silent reaction, it looks like it is, that it's future Sid that might have somehow sent that orb that captured him in the first place. Because he says it right at the end, and then she doesn't seem to say no, and then she kind of turns and leaves. So that was kind of an interesting what kind of a moment on the episode. And although that felt like that should have been the end, we then go just a little bit longer, and we have David wandering around in his pajamas in that club. We hear this odd, we'll just call it an odd, slow spoken and then electronic version of White Rabbit, the Jefferson Airplane song, which may be a tad bit too obvious for this show, but whatever, we'll forgive it. there's this one character we keep seeing him looking for, or noticing at the club, or whatever, and they kind of focus more here. Short boulder guy, bald guy who has like the smears across his head. We have no idea who this is as of yet, and what part this character is going to play. I'm pretty sure it's not the body of Farouk because he's hanging out in the within a few feet away from Oliver and Lenny. I think they would catch on to him being there as well. And that's basically how the episode ends, with him at that club and then appearing, going from the club to appearing in the doorway where Sid is sleeping. And that was pretty much how it ended.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it was a pretty decent start to the season. Obviously, it wasn't quite as mind-blowingly crazy as the season one premiere, the pilot ever was, but how could it be? I like that they caught us up on a lot of things. I was amazed by how much I remember just by watching, because I did not, unlike some people, unfortunately, I didn't do a rewatch of season one before this, so I had to just go in and watch those first couple minutes where it said, last season on Legion or whatever, which I don't even know if they did that. I think this is the fun thing about the show is that you're always going to have any number of questions and speculations by the end of every episode. I think there's so much to try to think about and register right now, and a lot of it's just setting up. I almost want to give it a couple more episodes before we really start to sink our teeth into it, because
right,
there are like big. Go on.
Well, there just isn't enough data at the moment to just where was David for the year? I mean, we know a couple little things, but there just isn't enough we can use to actually really theorize about these things very much. I mean, we could try, but
right.
It's not quite enough data. There's plenty of dancing, but
right.
not a lot of facts.
Like, what happened to his sister?
Yeah.
I don't even know. I mean, is she going to be on this season? Again, didn't go onto IMDb. I haven't looked it up, but where's Amy? She gets referenced in the episode about back when he refers to the last time, the other time he left Sid. But I'm kind of like, did anyone tell her that he's back? I'm kind of curious. Then there's probably a million other questions I have as well. Heck, there are things I'm still never been truly clear on from the first season, but I always kind of just go with it because I think it's just more, like the whole blue dream room place where they imagine is where they're together physically, as opposed to it being the reality or something. I've never been super duper clear on exactly how that works, beyond the fact that it happens when they actually make physical contact and kiss. And I guess it's something David was able to create with his abilities, or something like this little place for them to go. If I'm remembering, again, I don't remember as well as I should have. I probably, but I'm excited that it's back. And looking forward to talking about it, and hopefully maybe less monopolizing the podcast as I might have tonight. I apologize. But
that's fine.
Yeah, you were tired, I could tell.
Starting to get there a bit.
Well, is there anything else that caught your eye or fancy you wanted to mention before we wrap it up?
Oh, I think we got it covered pretty good there. We've discussed all the the catalyst and all these other things going on. So it's I'm looking forward to seeing what they do, and it's still. I think if you really give it a lot of thought, while there's tons of style going on, I think there's some stuff there. We got plenty to chew on here and think about, and it's for this kind of show, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I personally don't think it's purely style over substance. I would just say it's just that there's so much style.
Oh yeah,
that the substance can easily be overlooked. I mean, is it a super character driven show? I don't know. because at times I feel like I do get to know a lot about David and Sid and whatever. Um,
Right.
Maybe it's just because there's so much craziness going on. You're not going to get a quiet. You're not going to get a lot of quiet time with these characters. This isn't Rectify, It's
Oh,
just it's not that kind of a show. But I I certainly like or care about the characters I'm watching on the show, and if there are some people out there who don't feel that way, okay, that's fine. I know people who don't like Breaking Bad. That's fine. They're
yeah.
they're good friends of mine. It's just the way I can be friends with someone who likes true. Okay, maybe I can't be, but anyway. Alrighty. Well, that was our return to Legion. Um, Hopefully, if y'all, if there are any new listeners out there, if you follow the link that sent you here, you might be able to find our podcast that covered the first season. Generally speaking, they're really worthwhile. Um, I don't. You probably would not be able to find. I don't know if you'd be able to find them on iTunes, because I think iTunes only does. You can only access like the most recent 50. Now that this is number 202, I think, right? Um,
Yeah.
Actually, it may be. Actually, you know what? It might be. It might be there. You might find them there. Anyway, if you can find
Yeah.
them, they're
But
they're
if not, just Google the STVD podcast and on our Podbean page. If you scroll down or do a search for Legion, or just type in chapter, you might be able to find some of the earlier episodes.
yeah.
Scroll down, but
If you
they were a lot of fun to do. I would think I was awake for 6 of the 8. So if you enjoyed tonight, find the 2 where I was out of it. But it happens. I'm not a night owl like our friend from New York is here. But
well, City never sleeps. Blah blah blah.
yep,
Yeah, stvdpodcast.podbean.com is where you can find all 202 of our, once this one's posted, of our podcasts. And I think if you just go to the bottom of the screen and hit older posts once, the next
yeah.
screen you can find all the Legion ones intermingled with all the other ones that we did that year. Okay.
Yeah, they're all still on there. Just a few weeks ago, I went back and found the one where we pretended it was 2008 or whatever, and we were podcasting Breaking Bad, so God could listen to it. So
I love
they're
that.
all there.
I love that podcast. That's one of my. One of these days we'll have to come up with another wacky experimental idea. But,
Yeah,
hey, let's do. Imagine it was the first time we watched Twilight Zone. It's 1950s, and we're using these ham radios to do a podcast. Anyway, if you enjoyed this podcast, chances are you will enjoy hanging out on our Facebook page as well. It's the Serious TV Drama Podcast Facebook page. Like the page and join the conversation there. I mentioned iTunes. Yes, you can find us on iTunes. Punch in Serious TV Drama Podcast. You can subscribe to our feed, as well as rate and review us there as well. You can also follow us on Twitter. Our handle there is at STVD Podcast. It's STVD as in Serious TV Drama Podcast. We do have a few podcasts we're probably going to try to get done over the course of the next week or two. Obviously, we're going to be covering Legion every week. There may be one week where it gets complicated, but we'll figure it out when we get there. We also know we need to get to the second season of Travelers, since we've actually both watched it, and we've been kind of wanting to get that done. I think I inadvertently delayed us 1 week, and we just haven't gotten back to it. Same with The Crown. And I believe we do kind of want to get the gang back together for a big comic booky TV show, whatever related one that we haven't done in quite some time. So we'll get Cade. Well, Cade will probably be busy, doing something, or, with the rain making his electricity not work or something. But at least Jason and Vicky hopefully will be available, and we can get that one done hopefully in the next week as well.
Oh yeah, I got stuff I gotta say about some of those stuff too, because this isn't the podcast to talk about TV shows, but seriously, does Speedster Iris have to have a purple like lightning going behind her? Good job, CW. It's really fucking classy. Yeah. Hey, it's 1953, and girls love pink and purple. Let's do this. Congratulations, you're fucking amazing.
I just thought they just wanted to give her a different color. That's all. They were running out of
Yeah,
colors. We're going to give her green.
yeah.
Anyway,
I guess not. Ooh, that'd be cool looking.
I feel like they've done green for something else because
Yeah.
they've used red, they've used yellow, they've used what was in blue. Anyway, who cares? We'll save it for that podcast. Anyway, it was good. It was good. It was good getting back in the seat with you here. A little over an hour. Okay, still not bad by our normal standards. And I knew it'd be a little bit longer for the premiere, but still, I think the jinx was broken. So a few jinx.
Yep.
And I will look forward to getting back into podcasting with you again soon, Dan. And
Indeed.
with that said, because I'm obviously tired because I'm rambling now, good night to you and good night to everyone out there.
Good night.
Jesus. So professional.